Hope everyone is well, as well as can be. Uh, Lest I forget, at the end of our study today, I'd originally planned on doing today and tomorrow and then finishing this section of the book of Proverbs that we've been in for many months now, uh, these ongoing couplets. Um, that section ends in the middle of chapter 22, and I thought we would do what we're doing today. Today, I actually thought we would do it 2 weeks ago or 2 weeks ago, whenever there was a funeral. No, last week there was a funeral. In any case, in next week, there's a court case in that I'm a plaintiff in Santa Ana regarding bail practices by the Riverside um, County and Riverside Sheriff Department. And I think it's important for me to be there. And I'm a plaintiff along with some people who have been jailed in an unethical and seems illegal ways. So we're just going to do this now, and then we'll have a long break until after the holidays. That's just the way Sasha and I are going away for about a month, and then the high holidays. So we'll be taking quite a break. But let's finish this section today. This is our third time around in this one chapter. And part of that is because I wanted to get a taste of for myself, not just for everybody in the group, for myself of Midrash Mishlei. And we will have a bit of Midrash Mishlei today. And then to round it off, because that's all there was in Midrash Mishlei, I took a different theme, and that is to show something from early Midrash, which we'll get to the end today, from Sifra, from a Tannaitic Midrash, from mid-level, mid-term Midrash, we'll call it, from Midrash Tanchuma, and from Vaikar Rabbah, which is earlier, say 3rd, 4th century, Midrash Tanchuma, 4th, 5th century, maybe 6th century, and then this late Midrash that we're doing first, which is Midrash Mishlei, which is, I don't know, maybe the 10th or 11th century, not sure entirely. Need to finish the introduction in Wysocki's translation. Okay, then. So let's begin. Harold, if you would, 23 and 26.
Okay. One who watches over mouth and tongue keeps out of trouble. The proud, insolent person named Scoffer acts in a frenzy of insolence. The cravings of sluggards are fatal, for their hands refuse to work. All day long they are seized with craving, while the righteous give without stint.
Okay. Let's take the first two lines. Seems to be common sense, right? Like you could say, I didn't need the book of Proverbs to tell me that. Well, at some point, what we consider to be common sense was perhaps something new to the world. But that's on one hand. On the other hand, it's common sense, but how often do we forget that? How often do I forget that? Yeah. There's a lot, I'm thinking a lot about this issue of speaking out and dealing with getting into trouble and good trouble. I just bought on the anniversary of his birthday, oh, Congressman, Good Trouble, help me out.
John Lewis?
John Lewis's biography or memoirs. I saw it on the shelf, and there was a sale, as some of you know, at the bookstore in Palm Springs, which is moving right now. It will open to air tomorrow, I think, in a new location. And so I'm looking forward to reading very much so. But this idea of good trouble and something I've been maybe I didn't call it good trouble, but certainly perceive myself as being involved in for many years, less so these days than in the old days. But as of late, as some of you know, I've felt the need to speak out on the issue of the hunger and the destruction in Gaza more than I was beforehand. There was a time from the very first day of the war, Shmini Atzeret, when it started almost 2 years ago. I spoke out on the suffering on both sides. So that's not new for me amongst our group, our circle, but speaking out in a more public way, I have lately on what's happening in Gaza and or the worsening situation in Gaza. And I'm finding myself having to defend defend my position, defend speaking out, and not towards people I don't know, I don't really care, but people I've known for many years, including somebody who was a counselor of mine in camp in the 60s, who read a very long email to me yesterday, um, kind of claiming I'm insensitive towards this, etc., whatever. It took me a long time to write a reply. And we had a lot of driving yesterday, and during that time, I'm thinking to myself, driving, like, so why am I doing this? Why do I have to, why am I back in this battle? Why am I fighting? And so I don't know that, uh, you know, yeah, I could be quiet. I could not talk about, and this goes for all of us. It's not just me. I'm the one speaking right now. We could all be quiet about things, and our lives will be easier with our family, with our neighbors. But it's not a place that I necessarily want to be. On the other hand, there's so many things that I say in my life to people that I just didn't have to say. There was no good could come from it. Um, and maybe there's a difference between speaking publicly and speaking individually to people. Yeah. How about you folks? How do people react to these two lines? And aside from being common sense.
I agree. It's an easier thing to agree with than to actually put into practice. Uh, uh, I imagine all of us. I know I do. Why did I say that? Why did that come out of my mouth at this point? Yeah, it's common sense. Doesn't govern.
Okay.
It's,
I'm sorry.
no, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I think it's kind of like a a double-edged sword in the sense that there are times in in my past where I've spoken out or said things that I later regretted or shouldn't have, and so forth. But there were also times where I should have spoken out and didn't. And I think kind of learning to differentiate between, when are you going to just sort of sit there and take it, or when are you going to speak out? Um, and how are you going to speak out? I think it's something that needs to be learned over time. It's not something that, like, you say that the first two lines are common sense and everything, but it takes a long time to learn that, I think. It's not just something that uh, you can tell somebody, watch over your mouth and tongue and keep out, and that'll keep you out of trouble. And that's it. It's a process.
Hmm. Megan?
Harold just said exactly what I was going to say.
Okay.
Harold,
We both just said it.
you said it very well. Yeah, there's a time to speak up that I wish I'd spoken up. And sometimes when I'm spoken up, it's the wrong place to speak up, but I'm glad I said what I said, but I said it in the wrong group of people, or, it's not as simple as it sounds. It would be nice to just keep your mouth shut, never say anything about anything, but that's not me. So,
Charles?
Everything, I agree with everything that's been said, and I've tried, not always successfully, to give it a second or two or three of thought before I open my mouth. Maybe I decide in those 3 seconds, keep your mouth shut, And maybe in those 3 seconds, I say, no, I better say something.
So maybe the operative word here is shomer, to watch over. Shomer doesn't mean to keep close, right? It doesn't mean to not speak. It means shomer can be obey, it can be watch over, keep guard, guard your tongue, right? Although there's another word, nitzor l'shoncha, which we're going to see in the Midrash, that is more, feels more like guarding. I don't know if it's the same, but I think contemplate maybe would be the one who contemplates over his mouth, the one who takes three, to pauses a few seconds to breathe. Yeah, to read the email before you send it, or wait overnight. Let it rest a night. Yeah.
You started this session by referring to John Lewis's book about phrase good trouble. So you can think of this couplet as being not necessarily advice, but just an observation, and with neither a prescription nor an avoidance built into it. It's just, hey, that's the way we are.
Right. We've seen that choice between reading one of these psalms as prescriptive or descriptive a lot. Yeah. Good point. Yeah. Great.
I've had a habit of, I've done this recently, but in the past, when I was very angry, especially at a family member, of writing a letter to the person and expressing how I am, but then never mailing or sending it. And I just gave that advice to a friend of mine. I said, just write a letter, which is really angry at someone. I said, write a really, let everything out, and just then either throw the letter out or save it to look at in the future for yourself, not for the other person. So that's what I've done.
Letters, yeah. But save those letters, Richard, because we want to use them for your memoirs.
Well,
For your autobiography, for your biography.
I recently found when I wrote to my father, like maybe 40 or 50 years ago, and I only read the first few lines. It was just too painful, so I threw it out. So sorry, they're no longer available for my memoirs.
Did you write them on a computer?
No, 40 years ago, no.
Damn,
We
we
on a
could
piece
have
of paper.
saved it. Okay. All right, let's go on to the next couplet. The syntax is, look, it's poetic, so the syntax is a little weird for us, right? Zaid Yahir, when we use the word insolent Yahir in Hebrew, to this very day, Adam Yahir, it's not street Hebrew, but it's intellectual Hebrew, is someone who it's a sign of arrogance as well. Here it's insolent, but also perhaps arrogant, intentionally. Here it's proud. Zayd is also somebody who's intentionally evil. In fact, I'm sorry, insolent translates here as Zayd. Yahir is translated as proud. But they're similarly from semantic point of view. And what's a little bit off is in other words, there is a scoffer we've had quite a bit, which is kind of, a lates is also like a schmuck, a schmendrick, as not as much as a mamzer in Yiddish, right? Mamzer would be the more intentionally evil. Yeah. So anything to say about this? To me, this is part of the part of wisdom which talks about what I've been calling, since I've been an educator, culture. How we create culture of something, culture in ourselves, culture being something that we do on a regular basis, our way. People say in America, we have a tradition to do in our family to have cranberry sauce during, whatever. And there is this self-feeding constant, situation of insolence, of zadon, of intentionally doing evil. And you set it up in it's a self-perpetuating system. And maybe this is the flip side of the first couplet. Anything? Okay. Cravings of sluggards are fatal. Tavat atzel tamitenu. Another translation would be, the desires of a lazy person will kill that person. You think of an example of that? Well, not exercising, perhaps. Getting in the car instead of walking on a nice day. Because you haven't done it. Your hands have not done the work. Yeah. In other words, life takes an effort. Survival is an effort. Yes, Eileen.
I was just thinking of intellectually. I mean, if you don't use your mind, sometimes it gets away from you.
Well, if we bring this back to the things, just a moment, Rita Claire, if we bring this back to what's been on my mind, I just kind of, it's between government issues here and between Israel, Gaza, Israel, West Bank. This, I don't know how to articulate it well, but what I'm seeing, what I'm feeling are people who are stuck. Let's just talk about Israel, Palestine right now. People who I perceive to be stuck in a paradigm that was created decades ago, a century ago, strengthened by the Holocaust, strengthened by the the hostility of Israel's neighbors. And so much has changed in the world, in that paradigm, that people are stuck. And what they do read and the intakes that they do have information is that silo, and this inability or unwillingness, or in most cases, of to to give a listen, to give a chance, to consider alternatives. And to me, there's a laziness in that. As even though the same person might be extremely active in how they speak up, their social media, their writing for the press, their demonstrations, whatever it is. In other words, you could be not lazy in your physical energy, but you could be lazy in your intellect. That's where you've taken me, Eileen. Rita Claire.
I've been listening quite a bit, and all I can say is that it takes a lot of effort to put your thoughts into the proper words. And so in doing that, you can't be lazy, because you have to really put effort into thinking about what you're going to say before you say it. So having a large family and so many different personalities, I've had to learn to be very careful about what I say and how I say it and to whom. That makes a big difference too. Sometimes you feel more comfortable being a little bit more open in your feelings with one person rather than with another who may not accept your wisdom. So yeah, those are my thoughts.
Thank you. Yeah, we've kind of connected these three couplets together. It feels like they're from the same territory, same area of wisdom. And you brought a few of those together, Rita Claire. And now this one seems to definitely be speaking about the previous one, those same people who are sluggards, who refuse to work. So they're seized with craving all day long. And on the other hand, opposite that are the righteous who continue without stop to give. And I think to give is to give of their energy here. To give, to put in the effort.
To me, the phrase all day long they are seized with craving means I think of people who just live by their appetites, just to satisfy their own appetites, and are kind of essentially a slave to their own appetites, perhaps. Whereas the righteous are well past that.
I can't help but think of the saying, don't put off to tomorrow what you can do today. And that could apply to a lot of things.
Mhm. Okay, anything else on the contextual meaning of Proverbs here? So let's take a look at a later Midrash. Because it was Midrash Mishlei, and originally this page was the last part of what we did last time we met 2 weeks ago. It comes first, but it actually is the later chronologically of these Midrashim. I'll remind you that Vysotsky is at least taught me from the part of the introduction. By the way, with me, it's not, I have a different problem. It's not like I don't have I'm not lazy about reading and studying and hitting the books and looking, but I just get sidetracked. So for instance, there's a word I'm not sure of in English. I'll check on that, even though I know what the word in Hebrew means, but I already, well, if I don't know the word in English, I should know that word in English. And sure enough, 12 minutes have gone by. So the same thing in reading Vysotsky's rather short introduction to Midrash Mishlei that I got about a month ago. Something I would imagine was there. I got an email or I got something else distracted me, and I know exactly where the book is, and then there's a bookmarker exactly where I left off. But one of the things that I did learn in the part of the introduction that I read is that he sees this midrash as at the cusp of the midrashic rabbinic period and the rabbinic interpretation period, which would put it around 10th century or so, around. And I don't think he has an exact date as to when it's from, but that's what we call a late midrash. And so what that means, all in all, we need a lot more mileage that I hope that we'll get in the months to come. Now that I've got Vysotsky's edition to help with the translation. So let's see where this goes here. And this is now we're going to have two midrashim. This one, Mishlei and Vayikra Rabbah, which is a relatively much earlier midrash from say 6, 7, 8 centuries before that. 6 centuries before that, 6 or 7 centuries before that, are going to talk about this issue of speaking. That's the main topic here. Dan, if you would, read Midrash Mishlei for us.
He who guards his mouth and tongue guards himself from trouble. Rabbi Yishmael said, this shows that a person's death and resurrection are governed by his tongue. If he has earned merit and kept his tongue, has watched his mouth, it enlivens him. If not, it slays him. As David, and that's an error, has said, death and life are the power of the tongue. Hence Solomon prophesied and added to the wisdom of his father David, saying, he who guards his mouth and tongue guards himself from trouble.
Okay, so there's two main points that I learned from this short paragraph. aside from the overall issue, the overall thing has to do uh, with life in this world and life in the world to come after resurrection. So this is a rabbinic passage that does refer to resurrection. And then there is a section here when I wrote sick in the brackets there, that's my sick David, because it doesn't it's well, let's go back through it. So your tongue has a lot to do with not just what happens in this world. That's where the rabbinic saying, whereas Proverbs talks about this world, Proverbs takes you into reward and punishment in the world to come. And that has to do with resurrection. You will merit being resurrected if you are in the good guy camp, and you won't be resurrected if you're in the bad guy camp. Now, that whole discussion is as old as it's not biblical. There's only one passage in Daniel that really hints towards a belief in the resurrection of the dead, and that's 2nd century BCE, the latest of biblical traditions. But in rabbinic literature, and then in the intra-biblical, in the post-biblical pre-rabbinic literature, I think there's talk of resurrection. I don't, not an expert at it, but there's a long section in the Talmud in Sanhedrin. It talks about who have a place in the world to come and who don't have a place in the world to come. And one of the bad guy groups are those that don't believe in resurrection. Now, of course, this becomes a big thing in between Judaism and Christianity as well. So, first of all, those that grew up in liberal Jewish circles and were taught that, oh, we don't believe in resurrection, that's a Christian thing. No, not exactly. It comes from our tradition just as much as it comes from Christianity. It's just it means something rather different in Christianity. Charles, I see a series of letters and numbers. Is that something? Is that a link?
Hold on, I lost the thing. Hold on. No.
Okay, in the chat box,
Yeah.
there's a string of digits and letters. Okay, so that's one thing there. And so then the other thing is and then in reading it, it says, "Has kept his tongue, the one who the one, if he has earned merit, right, and kept his tongue or watched his mouth, it enlivens him." And I was wondering, I looked in the Hebrew, and also took me a while to realize what it's talking about. It enlivens him. So the him here is because in the Hebrew it's he enlivens him, Mechayehu. And so I thought, well, does that mean that God enlivens him? God brings him back to life? And I said, why would he translate it here? Oh, because it refers to the tongue. Silly me, right? The tongue gives him life. Your tongue, what you do with your tongue is in the life and death are in the power of the tongue, as the verse says. Okay, so that's one thing. And then the second interesting thing here is the quote from David. The quote is from Proverbs. Well, David's not the author of Proverbs. Solomon's the author of Proverbs. And so tucked away in here is an idea that I think is found in some other places, or certain scholars have said that Proverbs is not only the wisdom of Solomon, but it includes the wisdom that he learned from his father, David. So, I don't know that that's a systemic, there's a systematic way of looking at that, that we can tell which parts of Solomon, of Proverbs belong to Solomon, and which parts belong to David. But according to this particular tradition here, this is Solomon quoting his father, and then Solomon quoting himself, kind of. Solomon as himself in our verse here. All right, that was not so smooth, but is that understood? Do people? The main two things are the connection between not only reward but also resurrection itself. And why did it need to go to resurrection? I think because the word Chaim, there's life and there's eternal life. They're both in the word Chaim, yes. And the second thing here is this little business between David and Solomon. My natural tendency when I saw the original text in Hebrew was to say, well, if it says David, then it must be a typo, right? It must be something wrong with a misquote. And those things happen. But I think Wysotsky's note makes more sense, that it reflects the tradition that Solomon is quoting David, his father. Any comments? One of the things I think we've learned from Midrash Mishlei, that I've learned at least so far in this very brief and unprofessional selection of examples. In other words, it's not this is not responsible for me to make any conclusions. I haven't seen enough of the material, but I will say that there's a lack of clarity. It doesn't feel as smooth as self-explanatory, the text, which may just mean that it's a different period of time and I'm not used to reading these kinds of texts. It could be that it's one of those texts, and I don't know how many manuscripts there are. I don't remember. I'll have to, again, check his introduction. The more manuscripts there are of something, that's often or sometimes is a sign that the text was, no, it's a sign that the text was more widespread. The more widespread a text it is, the more edited it has become. It's like stones in the river. They become smooth and smooth. The more hands that have dealt with text, it could work the other way around. You could say the more hands that get involved, the more corrupt it becomes. The text becomes corrupt, meaning it's not a value thing. Corrupt, when we talk about corrupt text, means the text is not far from the original. And people, that I learned that notion from comparing study of the Jerusalem Talmud to the Babylonian Talmud. We had a good class in rabbinical school. We because it was a relatively small school and because we were so vocal, the students of my year, and we had all been graduate students at Hebrew University, so we had a high level of high expectations. We found that we had no class, almost no experience in two fields. One was Zohar. We figured that if we're becoming rabbis in the early 90s and Israelis are talking about Kabbalah and Zohar, it can't be that we have 4 years of rabbinical school and never have anything on the Zohar. So we petitioned and it came. The other thing was a class in Jerusalem Talmud, because a lot of us said that I'd been to yeshiva and then Hebrew University, and that we did a lot of Babylonian Talmud. And one of the things we saw right away is that the Jerusalem Talmud is far easier to understand. And the text is, the word that was used then is polished, because it was studied far more over the centuries around the world, the Jewish world, than the Jerusalem Talmud. And so the more hands that went through it, it's kind of like a new Wikipedia article as opposed to an older article. Maybe that would be a good analogy. Yeah. Okay. So now we have Vayikra Rabbah, which is we call it early classical midrash. It's earlier than Tanhuma, which we're going to see later. It's from the land of Israel. It's what we call a homiletical midrash. In other words, it's a series of sermons that are based around not the parsha, not the Torah portion, but the starot, which are the land of Israel way of reading it, which is about 3 times as many, a little more than 3 times as many Torah portions, because it was read over 3.5 years. And so what we have this here, and this is on the section of Mitzorah from Parshat Mitzorah, that has to do with the person who has been, it actually could be in Tazria, because the laws of tzarat, of scaly skin, in that part of the book of Leviticus, and there's a strong connection all throughout rabbinic literature between scaly skin, tzarat, which is sometimes translated leper, and lashon hara, gossiping. So with that in the background, why don't you take us away, Dan?
Another matter, this shall be the law of the leper. That is what is written. Who is the man who desires life? From Psalms. There was an incident involving a certain peddler who would circulate in the towns adjacent to Tzipuri and would proclaim and say, "Who seeks to purchase the elixir of life?" People would crowd around him. Rabbi Yanai was sitting and interpreting verses in his study. He heard the peddler proclaiming, "Who seeks the elixir of life?" He said to him, "Come in here and sell it to me." He said to him, "You and those like you do not require it." Rabbi Yanai pressed him and excuse me a moment. Rabbi Yanai pressed him and he came to him. The peddler took out the book of Psalms and showed him the verse. Who is the man who desires life? What is written after it? Guard your tongue from evil. Turn away from evil and perform good. Subsequent verses in Psalms. Rabbi Yanai said, Solomon too proclaims and says, one who guards his mouth and his tongue guards himself from troubles. Rabbi Yanai said, all my life I've been reading this verse, but I did not know how obvious it is until this peddler came and informed me. Who is the man who desires life? Therefore, Moses cautions Israel and says, this shall be the law of the leper, Hamatzorah, the law of the defamer, Hamotzi Shem Ra.
Okay. So a few things going on. Number one, the background is, if we're talking about the verse that we sing often. We do it around maybe high holidays, little Bi'achish Echafetz Chaim Ohev Yamim Lirato. It's sort of old tune that yeah, and this story, by the way, is the kind of story, this is the type of story I heard already, I think, if not in Hebrew school and Hebrew high, certainly, in my teen years already. It's one of those classics. The man who's walking with the secret potion for long life. And so one part of this story is common to many folk tales, in that the unexpected wisdom, or the wisdom comes from the unexpected character, right? Protagonist, right? The mere peddler comes to teach the great rabbi something. It also teaches us a little bit, perhaps, of realia of the time of the 3rd century. Rabbi Yanai is the first generation of Amoraim. Those are the ones that come after Tanaim, who were the sages of the time of the Mishnah. He's a student of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, who was the end of the period of the one who edited, who brought together, at least attributed to him, bringing together the oral traditions that became the Mishnah. So a famous rabbi, mentioned a huge amount of times. 3rd century, Tzipori, and another place near, I forgot, another had a yeshiva or a study house nearby. Another part of the reality is that he's sitting in his, the word in Aramaic here. This is actually this is a Hebrew part of Vayikra Rabbah. Much of Vayikra Rabbah is in Aramaic, but there's an Aramaic word which I don't know if it's, I'm guessing it's from the Greek, is traklin, and traklin is his, it's like his salon. Here it's translated his office or his study, but I think in most places more like a living room / dining room. And he brings him in. He's important, so the guy will come in. The guy also says to him, oh, this isn't for you, not for you. You don't need this. And of course, he takes out a book of Psalms. I mean, it's a wonderful flavor of folklore here, but connecting. And then the rabbi saying, oh, wow, I just, I've said these verses all my life and I didn't really get it. And how common is that for so many of us that pray and say words? And this goes for everything, not just for Jewish practice, but so many words we say all the time, we don't really get it until the child or the animal or the mountain teaches us something differently. Yeah. Okay. And all of that is having to do with reinforcing this idea of keeping yourself well and living in this world. This is about this world, as opposed to the previous one was about the world to come. It is watching your speech, right? Being careful how you speak. So then how does that connect to that last part? So now we go back to the larger context of the homily in Vayikra Rabbah and Leviticus Rabbah, is that this is part of it. There's a long chain of these davar acher, another matter, another matter, another matter. It's part of the process of the person giving the sermon who wants to get to the connection between scaly skin and speaking poorly, speaking evil. And that is a play on words which is found across rabbinic literature, is hamitzorah, that is the person who has the scaly skin, is broken down to hamotzi shemra, mitzurah, motzi shemra, one who speaks, what's a great translation of motzi shemra? Who dirties another one's name, who puts out a bad name for someone else, who disses. Anyway, what is the translation? Here it says defamer, the law of the defamer, motzi shemra, a defamer. But anyway, mitzorah, motzi shemra. Yeah. And so that connects it to the larger message of Vayikra Rabbah. And yeah, so nothing earth-shattering, but I think there's a lot to learn in a short paragraph like this about different things. Any comments or questions? Yes, Harold.
I was just wondering about the meaning of where you say the law of the defamer, hamotzi, and as soon as I see that word, hamotzi, I think of hamotzi lechem min haaretz.
And it's the same word.
Is that the same word? Because
Yeah.
hamotzi mean to take out?
Yes, yeah. The root is yatsa, to go out. So
Uh-huh.
we use the term for the exodus from Egypt, Yitziat Mitzrayim.
Uh-huh.
And Motzi Lechem Min Haaretz, we're praising God for taking out, bringing out the bread from the earth.
Okay.
And
So then hamotzi shemra, is that somebody who brings out a bad name?
yes, exactly. Brings out of their mouth.
Ah, I see. Oh, I see. Brings out of their mouth
Yeah.
a bad reputation of somebody else's. Okay. Okay.
Mhm. Yeah. Okay. All right, Rita Claire, do you want to read today?
Okay, where am I reading?
2730.
Okay, the sacrifice of the wicked is an abomination, the more so when offered in depravity. A false witness is doomed, but a man who listens will testify with success. The wicked man is brazen-faced, the upright man discerns his course. No wisdom, no prudence, and no counsel can prevail against God.
So for me, this section dances around the persona of the evil person. Did you want to say something? Sorry. Were you about to say something, Rita Claire?
No, I'm thinking.
Oh.
Am I thinking out loud?
No, I thought I heard a noise from somewhere. I wasn't looking at the screen. Okay, we'll see the Midrash in just a moment on this. An early Midrash, which is a little bit confusing, but so Zevach, sacrifice for whatever reasons. This image of somebody with ill intentions going through the motions of being pious is common from prophetic literature. In other words, it's not the actual deed that helps you in life. It's your it's your overall behavior, and you can't cover things up so easily. So and so this theme here is a theme that you find in prophetic literature as well. But this is intensified. In other words, if it's bad enough that an evil person is bringing a sacrifice, but it's even worse when they do so with depravity. And it doesn't say zima. Zima often is used in sexual connotations, sexual things that are sexually forbidden, zima, but not just though. Mizima is plotting something. So I guess, you know, an example might be you've got this horrible person bringing a sacrifice, and as he does it, he makes sure to look around that everybody can see that he's bringing an expensive animal. Maybe that would be it. Or as he does so, he insults the priest who's helping him do it. I don't know. Yeah. Now, did you want to say something, Rita Claire? No? Oh, okay. There's some noise. Okay. All right. Anything on these two lines? Now, we've had this before, this evil witness who is lying, this lying, untruthful witness, a false witness. It's bad enough, but the flip side of that is that how do you know somebody's a false witness? It's by listening, actively listening, right? Ish shomea. Ish shomea is not just a man who listened or listens right now. It's a listening man, a listening person. Fox points out that it's his being. He's a person we compliment by being a good listener. So a good listener, and then lenetzach yidaber often will say, people usually think in terms of netzach as forever. Will forever be speaking. That doesn't make sense in the context. What does make sense in this context is that lenatzach, as to lenatzach et hamischak, to win the game, to be victorious, to be successful in doing something. Yeah. Perhaps taken out of a courtroom situation. Similar to that is the evil person. An evil person may put on a good face, may not show their emotions, try to show they're not lying, but a seriously upright person is able to see. It says his course, but I think it more means his way. His behavior, who he is, who that person who's putting on an indifferent face really is. And finally, no matter what this person thinks they're doing, outsmarting the public, their fellow person, whoever it is, there's no way to really outsmart God. Right? And God is ever present. So this is one of those sections which is both humanistic and theological. Let's see what the Midrash does with this. Early Midrash, Sifra, from also on the book of Leviticus, and on the early section that has to do with when somebody brings a sacrifice. And the full verse is when Adam, that's the word Adam mikem. So it would be if one amongst you, and not the translation here, if he offer of you. I think it's one from amongst you brings a sacrifice to God. And then this Midrash is very Tanaitic, very early Midrash, and then the way it breaks it down and tries to, well, you want to say this way or this way, pulls up the syntax in different ways. A little bit complicated, but let's see what we might get out of this. Richard, you want to give it a try? Top of the second page. Just if you could unmute first.
Sorry about that. A man, if he offers of you a sacrifice to the Lord, a man, to include proselytes, of you, to exclude heretics. Why do you see it that way? Why not a man to include heretics, of you, to exclude proselytes? After scripture includes, it excludes by Kreah 1:2, the children of Israel, Just as the children of Israel are acceptors of the covenant, so proselytes to exclude heretics who do not accept the covenant. But why not say, just as the children of Israel are children of acceptors of the covenant, so heretics to exclude proselytes who are not? It is therefore written of you, like you, in your deeds, so that perforce we may understand it as, just as Israel are acceptors of the covenant, so proselytes to exclude heretics who are not, having broken the covenant. And thus it is written, the sacrifice of the wicked is an abomination. I have no idea what I just read.
Basically, we're talking about three classes of people here. There's regular, good, normal people. There are heretics, mishumadim, those who have rejected rabbinic interpretation of the religion. They might be Christians, they might be Samaritans, they might be others, they might be lovers of Greco-Roman culture. There's a lot of people they could possibly be, but the bad guys. And then there's the class of gerim, of converts, proselytes. Now, it's a question of who's in and who's out, who gets to be part of the holy community. And so without going into the details of how this midrash, like many of these Tannaitic midrashim, build it in such a way, it's in a very dialectic form here. You might read it this way and come to this conclusion, but why not read it this way and come to this conclusion? And that, by the way, is the way it goes according to a particular rule that we have in how we read these verses to find out what the truth is. Oh, the reason for not is this. So without going into the details, that's kind of what's happened here, right? It does, when it says a man, so does that include the converts, or does it not include converts? Does it include heretics or not? It's clear that it includes regular people, right? But is it inclusive or is it exclusive? And the overall purpose of this is to show, and in the context of using this proof text from our proof text, the sacrifice of the wicked is an abomination, is to show who's in and who's out, who gets to do what. And it's a way of being more inclusive of the converts, who many people were very suspicious of, and were very perhaps intolerant, or were intolerant of. And it's a way of excluding heretics, maybe at a time when people were, this is total speculation, but maybe there was those who were followers of Jesus, let's say, but still still Jewish, still part of the Jewish community. Who gets to, because nobody's offering sacrifices at the time this is written, right? This is just using that as a prop to talk about who's in and who's out. So where I would go to try to find out more is I would look through some of the books that I have, or books that are about that period of time, when this ongoing period of of a few generations, where there's a total separation of the church from the synagogue, just using those two terms symbolically, to see if this is one of those passages that perhaps reflects. Another place to look would be Finkelstein, Louis Finkelstein wrote as a commentary that I don't have, extensive commentary on Sifra Vayikra, on this Midrash Tanaim. But that could be where it's at. But all of this, though, is summed up in our verse, is that you should know the converts are not wicked. It's the heretics, even though they were born Jewish, even though they may look more Jewish, maybe their Yiddish is better, but their sacrifice, they're the wicked, whose sacrifice is an abomination. Okay. So let's and less complicated, but still complicated, is on the last verse, which I've isolated because that's how the Masoretic notes of the book of Proverbs have this. This verse is, there's a break between the previous verse and this verse. And this verse seems to have nothing to do with anything had beforehand, or if I remember correctly, with anything that comes afterwards as well. The horse is readied for the day of battle, but victory, I will insert, really comes from God, right? You might be prepared with the best tanks and the best jets and the best everything, but if God doesn't want it to happen, it's not going to happen. So a very theological part. And now we have Midrash Tanchuma. Dan, I'll ask you to do this for us. And this is from the section in Deuteronomy, Shoftim, that talks about going out to war. When you go out to war, and then there's a number of mitzvot, commandments that have to do with a wartime situation. Go ahead.
When you go out to war and you see horse and chariot, people more numerous than you, this is what's stated in the verse in Proverbs. The horse is readied for the day of battle, but the salvation comes from the Lord. What's the meaning of the horse is ready? At the time that Israel left Egypt, what's written there? And it was told to the king of Egypt that the people had fled in Exodus immediately. And he tied his chariot and he took his people with him. And he took 600 of his picked chariots. Pharaoh stood and dressed all the horses, even the common ones, with precious stones and pearls. And Egypt gave chase to them, etc., all the chariot horses of Pharaoh, his horsemen, and his army. This teaches that not one of them fell ill, and not one of them died, and not one of them got tired. Hence it is stated, all the chariot horses of Pharaoh, etc.
Okay, so before we go on, why does it go into the detail? I understand what it says about Pharaoh getting up and dressing them himself, right? That's part of to show how Pharaoh was so hell-bent on the destruction of Israel, he did it himself, right? We have that same tradition between Bilam and Abraham saddling the ass each by themselves, not with the aid of their servants, to show just how farbrenta, how intentional they were in getting it done. What part do does the bedecking of with jewelry, what does it say here? Precious stones and pearls on their horses. Like, what is that about? Yeah, I'm not sure. And again, don't have, I need to find my Tanhuma books, which I've mentioned many times are hidden away in some box or something, to see what one of the commentaries would say. So I'm not sure. But
It,
go ahead.
it's like he's anticipating the victory parade before the battle.
Yeah, that could be it very well. Yeah. Yeah. Just look how complete, utterly, look how fancy these tanks are. These tanks are so sophisticated. Merkava, Mach 5, and they could do this, and they got air conditioning, they got this. And, okay. Okay. It's too late to tell a story. So go ahead. Yeah. An irrelevant, unconnected story. Go ahead. So next paragraph.
As Pharaoh drew near, the children of Israel raised their eyes. At that time, the children of Israel began to cry out to the Holy One, blessed be he, as it is stated, and the children of Israel cried out to the Lord. The Holy One, blessed be he, said, O my dove, in the cranny of the rocks, hidden by the cliff, from Song of Songs. To what was Israel comparable at that time? To a dove that fled from in front of a hawk and came to hide behind a rock. But the snake was within that space already. If it sought to exit, behold, the hawk is at the opening. So too was Israel. The sea was increasingly storming against them. The enemy was giving chase behind them, and the wild animals were closing in from the wilderness. And so they were surrounded on four sides. And from where do we know that there were animals from the wilderness, since it's stated, the wilderness enclosed, sagar, them. And enclosed is not only an expression indicating wild animals, as is stated in Daniel, my God sent his angel who closed, sagar, the mouths of the lions. What did they do? They lifted their eyes to the Father in the heavens and cried out, as it is stated, as Pharaoh drew near, the children of Israel raised their eyes, etc., and the children of Israel cried out to the Lord. Hence it's written, O my dove, in the cranny of the rocks.
It sounds like this Midrash is really about that verse in Song of Songs, right? That kind of explaining, in that analogy, how do you parse out each part of the analogy between Shir HaShirim, Song of Songs, and the relationship between the people of Israel and God. But it utilizes our verse in talking about this very special scene, which is been greatly embellished from the Torah. The portion that we have, the Torah says basically they're stuck between a rock and a hard place. On one side the sea, the other side Pharaoh's thing. But to aggrandize this whole miracle that happened, it's not only between the sea and the sea and Pharaoh's horses, who were, by the way, dressed up with pearls and jewels for the victory parade, but also there were wild animals there. And then you say, well, where did you get wild animals from? Oh, because it says that it says that the desert sagar lehem, the desert enclosed, and there was nowhere for them to go. Right, they're like in one of these movies or TV shows where you got all things are happening at one time. How are they going to get out of it? And that same word sagar we find in another book, in Book of Daniel, in Aramaic yet, having to do with the lions, and God closed the lion's mouth, so therefore they didn't hurt Daniel, who was thrown into the lion's den. This is the Midrashic imagination, and all this to show you that you could be under the threat of the worst weapons in the world, the best equipped enemy in the world, doesn't matter. Or you could have the best weapons in the world, and you could be in that situation. If God doesn't want you to win, you're not going to win. And maybe we leave that as a word of comfort, of nechama, of hope, a glimmer of hope for this time, this period, that next time we meet as a group, at least in this particular context, it could be better and it could be far, far worse, on the cusp of something that this is despair that I personally have not felt. This is not despair of, for me, of evil being done to us as a people, but right now it's a despair of feeling of evil that is that we're doing to ourselves. Evil, I mean, as far as the state of Israel, my own feelings right now, one could say that as an American as well. And the collective, how are we part of a collective? Can we easily say, well, I'm not that, I'm not the government of Israel, or I'm not the current administration in this country, or I'm not whatever. So maybe the hope is in the fact that there is a guiding power that won't let certain things happen, even if human beings do make the wrong choices.